And welcome everyone to another Smart Money Circle episode. I'm Adam Sarhan. With me today is Eric Brandon Robinson, who's a co-founder and CEO at Horizon Aircraft, ticker symbol is HOVR. Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time and welcome to the Smart Money Circle.
Thanks, Adam. Happy to be here.
So I always like to begin. Can you please tell us your story and how you got to where you are today?
Well, it's an interesting story. It starts back at a gas station. I was in the last year of high school. A typical kid. I had no idea what I wanted to do for a living, and my father was an engineer, so I'd applied to three engineering schools, and I was working for a gentleman at the gas station who owned it. Gentleman by the name of Steve Hart, who had gone through pilot training in the Air Force and went on to a successful naval career afterwards. Um, but he said, "Listen, Brandon, like you don't know what you're doing in life. Have you ever considered flying jets in the Air Force?" And I said, "That sounds cool, like Top Gun, like Maverick." He's like, "Yep, absolutely, but it's really hard, and you probably won't get in." And I was a pretty competitive kid, and so he kind of had me at it's really hard, and you're not going to get in. So, now, long story short, they took me down to Royal Military College. It's like a West Point sort of version in Canada. There's only one military academy, and I fell in love with it, to be honest, instantaneously. Ran down, applied for Royal Military College for the academy, signed up as a pilot, and fast forward 4 years, I had a mechanical engineering degree and did some pilot training and managed to get myself into the fighter jet program, and had an interesting career in the Air Force. Near the end of my career in the Air Force, I had an opportunity to kind of either go up or out into the private sector. I was always interested in business, and applying the engineering degree a little bit, and just had a very fortunate opportunity to, yeah, do this crazy thing with my father when a group of investors approached him and they wanted to understand about the electric vertical takeoff and landing space, these new machines that would take off and land like a helicopter, but fly us around like the Jetsons. We came up with a really cool concept for the investors, and they liked it, and that's how Horizon Aircraft was born, and kind of my foray into this crazy new world started.
Wow, what a crazy story and a great story from a gas station and then to
Yeah,
the Air
exactly.
Force. Thank you for your service. And then also going to business and also getting the engineering degree and knocking that out as well. So congrats. That's a great story. So please tell us about Horizon Aircraft, what you do and your competitive advantages and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, so when those investors approached us, it was interesting because we took a really hard look at the space. Unlike some of the, let's go back to like 2017, 2018. Unlike some of those other companies that seem to come out of university think tanks with great ideas and great renderings, or a bunch of Silicon Valley folks that thought all electric aircraft were going to be amazing. We had a lot of operational experience. So I had flown fighter aircraft for 2 decades in the Air Force, did the Canadian version of Top Gun, very operationally focused. I've been in a lot of sticky situations. I know how harsh the air environment could be. I had an airline transport pilot's license, so I knew what it was like on the commercial side, friends that had flown commercially. And my father had flown for 6 decades, right? 60 years of flying experience. I was basically born in an airplane. So we came at it from a very operational perspective. We thought if the technology exists and we can build one of these things, and if we could focus on the operator and the safety aspects of it and make it commercially viable, then they would be adopted, and then we could change the world, basically, change how people move around the planet. So we came at it from a little bit of a different angle, and we spent a lot of time really asking ourselves the hard engineering questions. And we saw a giant gap in the market forming. So a lot of the folks are focused on these all electric aircraft. They carry between 2 and 3,000 pounds of lithium ion batteries on board. And we're excited for that future, don't get me wrong. But we calculated that ranges would be very, very limited and their operational flexibility would be limited to nice weather days, etc. We designed a concept that would bridge that gap. An aircraft that was tough, built for the real world, that would travel instead of 50 miles, would go 500 miles, between cities, not just within cities. Could transport organs and injured people at twice the speed at a fraction of the cost. Um, and it was built using technology that exists right now. And so we put that concept together. It resonated with the group of investors, and that's been our competitive advantage since the beginning. And I think now, again, when you've seen the recent news that we put out, it's the concept has been validated, the underlying technology has been validated, and we're pretty excited about our rapid progress.
I love it. So let's share that recent news with everybody, please.
Yeah, so there's only been in history a few companies that have transitioned the modern VTOL from hover, where it takes off and lands in any helipad, to forward flight, where it's configured for its en route flight. Um, Historically, that has been very, very challenging. Again, there's only a couple companies in the world that have ever done that successfully, and we're the first company in the world, in the history of the world, that has done it using our special technology. Very elegant solution, very safe, very stable. A lot of other folks use these complicated multi-copter systems with, call it 6 or 8 rotors that looks, start like a helicopter and then rotate forward. Now, ours is completely different and much simpler way of doing business. Like I said, we join only a few companies in the world that have actually accomplished transition from hover to forward flight in the modern VTOL world.
Wow, congratulations. That's amazing news.
I know, I'm
And
really excited for the team, really proud of them.
yeah, so you're able to take off up and down like a helicopter and then actually
Yep.
go forward as well. Is that correct?
Yes, that's and go forward. And when we do transition to that forward flight, the aircraft transforms. The wings do a special thing where they close the fans inside the wings, and the aircraft returns to just a simple aircraft configuration. So when it's flying for 98% of the mission, it looks and it flies just like a normal airplane that everybody knows and is comfortable with. It's not a multi-copter beating the cockpit to death, with all these different rotors. It's not a new configuration. It's just a very simple way of flying and a very efficient one.
I love it. Okay, let's talk about risk management and shift the conversation a little bit to some timeless lessons, which is my favorite part of the show. So,
I
Brendan, how do
love
you
it.
handle risk and what are some mistakes you see people make with respect to risk management? I'd like to go across your entire experience from engineering to military to business, anywhere you would like to go for all of these remaining questions, please.
Oh, I love it. Okay. And you'll get some counterintuitive answers out of me, I think, which might get some people fired up. So, on the engineering side, here's one way to reduce risk is take a little more risk. You know, and what I mean by that is instead of spending 3 years inside a computer, doing computer automated, design and doing multiple hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of simulations, maybe do 20% of that work, get the concept sorted out that you think is going to work, do the simulations and the math, the realistic math that uh, makes certain that the concept is likely to work, and then build one of those things and test it safely in the real world and see if it actually performs. If it actually performs, then you can circle back and recalibrate some of your simulations using real world test data, and getting those products out in the real world, testing them earlier than you might think, letting them fail, iterating very, very quickly using modern technology, 3D printing, all of the really cool stuff that we have now. I think might sound risky initially, like Elon understands this, right? You blow up a couple starships, but you iterate quickly, and guess what? He's flying and saving, astronauts from international space stations and whatnot. Um, it is a really interesting way to mitigate risk by taking what looks like a little more risk upfront, and that's from a process engineering perspective and getting your product out there in the real world. So that's one way we reduce risk on the engineering side. Another way is actually spending a little more on industry experts upfront. So the typical startup, if you're reading your Business 101 book, might be, a bunch of people in a sort of a, university dorm, putting together a concept and really working hard and hiring a lot of sort of lower paid folks, and they just hammer through, these, a lot of work up front. We have done it a little bit upside down where we've hired some industry experts. It's painful when the payroll comes out, but these are world-class folks, top 10 folks in the world in propulsion, electric architectures, hybrid electric architectures, aerodynamics. For the wing, we've consulted with the top wing construction folks in the world from a certain company. I can't name it. But now, once we have this top layer established and we really focus on realistic engineering with people that have been in the industry, decades, 20, 30 plus years, that have designed and built these all electric architectures, hybrid electric architectures, new aircraft, allows us to iterate very quickly. So we're taking a risk on people up front because those are big salaries and that's a lot of cash burn for the company. And then we bring in the muscle, the university students, the the folks that have a lot of potential that can do the hard detailed work when the architecture is set. So that's taking a bit of a risk up front on some of the folks that's going to work out. Now we got to be careful because we need sort of outside the box thinkers. Sometimes if you get a 2 or 3 decade person, they're locked into certain paradigms. But that's worked out really well for us. So free thinking, very experienced folks that have been there, done that, and can iterate very quickly to a reasonable solution. Taking a bit more risk on the people in that respect has worked pretty well.
I love it. So you're
Um,
saying like, sorry,
yeah,
just jump in here for a second. Just Elon says, "Hey, I've got 5 rockets. I'm just going to shoot four up, shoot one, blow it up. It's okay. We don't. No one dies. We just lose some money. Shoot a second, learn from it, adjust, learn from it, adjust. Then finally, the fifth rocket works. Is that and you didn't lose anything except some money, but you're moving fast and you're learning, whereas the other guys are still sitting there on the computer simulations and on their first rocket. So is that what you're saying by take more risk, but do it in a calculated way? Is that a correct way of summarizing it?
that's an excellent way of summarizing. Now, Elon didn't want to blow up any rockets, right? He would
Right.
wish the first one worked. You do as much work as you can, but the problem with engineering, especially really advanced aerospace engineering and space engineering, you don't know what you don't know. And you don't know exactly where the weaknesses are and what's going to fail. So you do the best job you can. Think of it as a Pareto distribution, right? Um, Instead of doing 80% or 90% of the work on the computer and then going and finding some random thing fail, you do 20% that gets you 80% of the way there. Maybe it's a bit different. Maybe you do 30% that gets you 90% there. And then you build it and test it and see if it works. And hopefully it does work the first time, but invariably it will not. And if it doesn't fail, then you've probably over-engineered it in a couple of different ways, if that makes sense, right?
Yep.
We can't just afford to put a 20x safety factor on like a bridge builder would do, right? And it can carry 20 or 100 times as much weight as it needs to. Aerospace engineering and space engineering is very, very close to the edge. Elon's got a famous message where you cut out everything until something fails, and then you slowly add things back in to get right to that to edge that makes sense. And so we kind of take the same approach. So well said, well summarized. I agree with your summary there.
Thank you. And then were you going to continue before I jumped in, or was that all
Well,
you were
yeah,
going to
yeah.
say?
You
Okay.
moved on from engineering on the military side. You know, I guess risk management moves into kind of a business discussion on there. So obviously, a bunch of militaries have been quite interested in what we have, right? So Um, if you have a helicopter that can travel twice as fast, that's quieter and a bit safer, I mean, you can do special forces infiltration, exfiltration stuff. You can go get a casualty, do a casualty evacuation called CASEVAC. Personnel recovery, if there's a down pilot across enemy lines, you can go get them twice the speed. This type of aircraft, I would have loved to have had it in the Air Force. One of my missions that I used to do was planning and leading coalition NATO strike missions and training, 100 aircraft airborne. Helicopters were always kind of a limiting factor in terms of their speed and in terms of going to get to do those various missions I just mentioned. And this would have been a great machine. Now, from a risk management perspective, since we're kind of in that sphere, it is not as easy as you might think to bifurcate the development of an aircraft into a military variant and a civilian variant. The military folks, they're cost sensitive, but not as much. Capability matters much more. And so putting defensive systems on board, making sure there's enough electronic or electric generation power to run all the different sensor payloads that they would want, make sure it's hardened for electromagnetic interference and signature managed and all sorts of different things. Um, is a challenge, and the militaries are very very concerned about all that stuff. So the military variant and the civilian variant sort of separate earlier on in the development than people might think. However, the militaries are very well funded when it comes to developing these novel technologies and technology especially that are going to be very useful. And a lot of the hardening that occurs on the military development program, those lessons learned can be translated to make a much safer civilian aircraft as well. So there's a lot of benefits from a risk management perspective for taking that risk and going down the route from a business perspective of working with the militaries around the world. And selfishly, I want to give back as well. And if I can build something that can help troops save people's lives and just be a better tool to help folks on the military side and serve the country, I'm very happy to do that.
It's a big win for sure. So I love that. Thank you for explaining that risk side of it because risk management is really, really important, especially in the work you're doing. So let's talk about timeless lessons, Brendan, that you've learned along the way that you'd like to share with the audience.
Oh, so how long do we have here? Lots
As
of
long as you want. We'll
so
take it with
many
a clean
lessons
thank you.
learned.
Yeah.
One is the first lesson learned is to listen to the experts, right? As a founder, you tend to be very optimistic and, you can be really leaning forward. But when a 3-decade electrical engineer comes to you and says, listen, this is a novel system. Here are some of the issues that we need to solve. You can't just whitewash that and go, yeah, yeah, we'll figure that out later, right? No, no, you have to listen to those experts and really take on board their critical feedback. I think as a fighter pilot, you're uniquely maybe qualified to take critical feedback because literally everything we do after every single mission, we don't high five ourselves like in Top Gun, right? We look in the mirror and we just focus on all the things that we did wrong, which is a million things on any given mission. It's a pretty humbling vocation. Um, and so that is a lesson learned. Listen to the experts, take critical feedback. Don't get passionate about it. Take a very, I'd say, dispassionate analytical approach to what they're saying, first principles analysis, and then go from there and respect their very significant experience in that area. That's been one lesson learned. A second lesson learned, and we're pretty proud of this, is just be authentic, right? So there's been a lot of overhype in this space where there's a lot of companies, I will say, over-promising, maybe by accident, right? Linked to the first thing that I said, where there's just a lot of optimism in terms of what batteries can do and what these novel new architectures can do. Authenticity will shine through eventually, right? So be honest about your product, be honest about its performance, be honest about the challenges that face the company from a technical development. Um, and I think that will start to resonate with folks. And I think the third lesson learned is instead of an if you build it, they will come approach. There's a lot of amazing new technologies being developed across the spectrum of aerospace, space, nuclear power, like all sorts of different areas. You need to really focus on a problem that the operators have at the lowest level. If you build it, they will come approach. So I'm going to build this amazing new machine because I can, and then I got to try to figure out what to do with it. I think that's a backwards approach. I think the tried and tested approach of listening to the operators, listening to your eventual customer, be it lessors in our case, or regional operators, operators of emergency medical service helicopters, helicopter operators in all sorts of different areas. You have to really understand their problems, how they operate, the difficulties that they have, and then build a machine that is better than what they have now. If you can't do that and they can't buy your machine and use it in their operation, you can build the most fancy thing in the world. It's not going to work. So I think one of our final lessons learned is understand the operator in detail, listen to them, take all the critical feedback, iterate your design until you have something that is useful for them and that they want to have. And I think we're pretty proud of the fact that we've done that. It's taken a lot of work to do that, to make that effort, but it's resulted in, I think, a pretty awesome product.
I love it. So flip side of that would be timeless mistakes. Can you please give us some timeless mistakes and how to learn from them or how to avoid them?
Yeah, so again, we don't have enough time to go through all the mistakes that we've made along the way, but um, certain small things are easy to underestimate. A good example for us is the complexity of some of the control systems associated in the software. In the modern world, I mean, the software is challenging. We think we've got a great approach now, but that took us a lot longer, especially on our large scale prototype, to sort out than we thought, right? So the mistake was not, if we're getting into the details, having enough focus on the software side and having the flight controls sorted out early enough from an architectural perspective. So we learned kind of the hard way there. Um, another, yeah. So I would say that was kind of the premier one, if that makes any sense. Do you want to dig into that at all, or do you want to keep
Yeah,
going?
anywhere you want to go. I mean, let's hit that by all means.
Yeah, and so now we're focused on the full scale aircraft. So now we've moved on to building the full scale aircraft, and again, we brought in some professionals now that have built full scale, designed and architected and built full scale electric aircraft. My CTO was like, "Well, you realize like 40% of the company is going to be software engineers at one point um, to get this sorted. And by the way, we need to sort out the software architecture and the flight control system right now. And so yesterday we spent the entire day with one of the leading flight control and avionics groups in the world. That came in, took a look. We spent a lot of time up front going over all of those difficult things and starting those things right now has been very critical, and I think is going to pay dividends in the end.
Love it. Well, thank you for sharing that. Okay, next question. Let's talk about leadership. What makes a great leader? What are some lessons you've learned about leadership from military, from business, from engineering, anywhere you want to go, please?
Okay, so in the Air Force, I went through the Canadian version of Top Gun. We have a kind of a mantra, and it's humble, approachable, and credible, right? So the first one is humble. I think as a leader, you really have to have some humility, right? So there are a lot of people that are very intelligent and very capable completely surrounding you, right? So in the Air Force, I had the good fortune to work with some incredibly talented individuals. Three of them are astronauts right now. One is going to do Artemis 2 pretty soon. Another buddy is going to go up to the International Space Station next summer. I had a buddy that just flew Virgin Galactic's Unity to space. These are exceptional human beings, and if you don't maintain a certain amount of humility and accept that you're all in this together and you don't know everything, I think from a leadership perspective that can be crippling, right? It's easy to think that you know best in all the scenarios, but I think the more you know about the world and about things, the more you should feel that you don't know about them. A great story about my son asking me some very technical physics questions, if you want a funny analogy, but literally had no idea. He asked me, Dad, like, why don't humans fall to the center of the earth? Like if atoms are all space, and if, hydrogen atom, he's in grade 4. If a hydrogen atom is the size of a baseball stadium and the nucleus is like a marble on the pitcher's mound, and the electron is less than a grain of sand around the edge, it's all just space. So how come we don't fall to the middle of the earth? Like,
Love the
that doesn't
question.
make any sense.
Genius. Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't know the answer. I said initially, I think it's electrostatic repulsion between the electrons, keeping the, valence shells separated. And he's like, I don't know. I don't think so. Because he had heard about it a little bit. So we watched a Veritasium episode for 35 minutes, and I just realized I didn't know. And we watched it together, and we both learned why that was the case. Um, anyway, and maybe I'll leave it as a cliffhanger of
Well, I was about
actually.
to say, well, why was it the case? I'm curious.
So if any of the viewers actually know about fermionic repulsion from the valence shell, so fermions, electrons are fermions. They can't exist in the exact same quantum state, right? So for a reason that we don't know, fermions don't allow themselves to be in the same state, and so the valence shells statistically repulse themselves actually. And so because the two shells can't come together and an electron can't get close to that energy and momentum level, angular momentum level, it stays apart. It's not electrostatic repulsion by traditional calculations. They just can't exist in the same place, so they stay
Understood.
apart.
Yeah.
Really interesting, fascinating. So there's that humility, right? So as a leader, you have to stay humble, approachable. It simply means you need, especially in the Air Force, and I think in a company as well, you need all the folks to be able to feel comfortable coming to you and saying, there's something wrong here, right? We're doing something wrong. At least challenge the status quo. If you're not approachable, there's a lot of examples that throughout history where maybe the leaders aren't as approachable as they might have been. Um, yeah, you don't get that feedback, and you learn too late that things are going wrong. So that approachability, I think, is really important. And then from a credibility perspective, you have to be able to walk the walk a little bit, right? Or walk the talk, I should say. So you have to be able to understand, the technical challenges. You have to, for myself, I have to understand a lot about electrical engineering, aerospace engineering, structural engineering when it comes to that sort of thing to understand certification. And I can't just have a surface level understanding of it. I need to do the hard work and have the credibility to be able to steer the company in the correct way when approached by these very smart people who, feel free to approach me and have a problem. I need to figure out how to solve it, and you need the credibility and the underlying or underpinning technology, or sorry, knowledge, I should say, in order to do so. So humble, approachable, credible. That's what I live by, and it seems to be working out pretty well.
I love it. So humble, approachable, incredible. That's a really fantastic way of summarizing leadership. How about the next question for you is adversity? How do you handle adversity, and what are some obstacles that you had to overcome along the way?
So it's not easy starting a new business, right? I think there's a famous quote. It's like chewing glass while staring into the abyss in most days. As especially as a founder, I mean, you get all of the hardest problems that nobody else can fix, beneath you, right? And they're often, either personnel problems, technical problems, strategic problems in terms of where to go. It takes a lot out of you. So you need a good support network. You need to be sorted out. Family, I'm very, very, very fortunate. I have a great family, a beautiful wife who's very supportive, amazing kids. And that really provides a lot of strength when the foundation is really solid like that. It's absolutely, absolutely critical. I think that's the most important thing.
I love it. And then let's talk about the final question for you today, Brandon, is what is the best piece of advice you'd like to give the audience or your 30-year-old self?
Oh man, that's a great question. Okay, so for my 30-year-old self, I would like to say maybe stop and smell the roses a little bit. I was really a hard charger, and I wanted to do everything that I could and to accomplish everything in a single day. And I would say, spend a bit more time on the personal side with your friends and building your network and maybe just taking it a bit more easy and enjoying the moments, stopping every once in a while just take a deep breath, right? Now I'd say at the same time, I was able to accomplish quite a bit in a short period of time, but there's no free lunch when it comes to that, right? So I had some pretty sharp edges back then. I would tell myself to just chill out, give some people some breaks, and just slow down a little bit. Um, yeah, so that's the advice I'd give my 30-year-old self. And the second question was what I would do differently now.
No, just general advice for the audience or to your
Oh,
30-year-old self. Yeah.
general advice for the audience. I would say stay curious, right? The world is an amazing place. There are so many awesome things happening. I am literally interested in every single piece of what's going on, from geopolitics through to nuclear fusion and new thorium molten salt reactor fission stuff that's happening in China to, new breakthroughs in room temperature superconducting materials and femtosecond laser pulse stuff like it. I am interested in everything in the world. It's such a cool place. Stay curious, stay humble about it. Try to get as informed as you can about the stuff, and maybe hold off on forming opinions right away, and focus on building a foundational knowledge set in anything that you're very interested in. And maybe stay off social media is another good one because it's increasingly a crazy negative space. I think there's a lot of high profile folks that are kind of pulling away. So anyway, those are that's some advice. And yeah, and the last one is take a second, and it's easy to focus. Humans focus. It's type 2 bias, I think it's called, from a psychology book in the back. you know, Humans survive because whenever the grass rippled, we would think there's a tiger in it, right? In the modern 2025 version of that, it's easy to stay focused on all the negative stuff, social media and everything that's happening in the world. It's a pretty cool freaking place. And so, go out, touch some grass, hug your kids. Life is amazing. So, and that's what I kind of end with. If that makes sense.
I love it. No, it makes perfect sense. Actually, you're the second guest in the last week who told me the same thing about slowing down, enjoying the moment. And the advice of the 30-year-old self was the same thing. The person was the CEO of Abacus Global, which is a company that does life insurance, Brandon. But he talks to people that are in the older stage of their lives and they have life insurance, they give up their policy, whatever the case is. But he goes, when you look back in your life at that age and you look back at what you've done, time is the most valuable asset, right? We can't buy more time. And he
Correct.
goes, the one way and it goes by fast. So the one way to slow it down is to be present and in the moment and right now, focused on the now, right? That slows down time. And he's like, if you
Super
can
well
learn
said.
to do that, it's so powerful. And it echoes what you're saying here.
Yep, super well said. Sit on the end of the dock. I'm going to do that today, and just look out at the water and just try not to think about too much, just for a couple of minutes anyway.
Yeah, right. Enjoy it. All right, beautiful. Brendan, thank you so much. Congrats on all the success. Ticker symbol is HOVR. Hopefully, we'll have you on again soon.
Ah, thanks, Adam. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.